My name is Michelle Renee Yisrael. I am posting this video for Black History Month about Olaudah Equiano. The Most High allowed me to find this jewel of a slave narrative some years ago when I was searching for readings for my African American literature course that I teach at a college in the Chicagoland area. When Olaudah Equiano left West Africa and arrived to the Western Shore as a young slave boy, he decided the best way to figure out how to free himself from the slavers was to be quiet and not cause them any trouble. So he watched, listened, and he learned. He already knew several African languages, so it was not difficult for him to teach himself to read and write English as well. He did not forget his memories of his families and his people regarding a, Semitic lifestyle and the laws God gave to Moses in the wilderness. He was trained as a seaman, first on the first slave ship, which transported him. Then he was sold to another ship, a warship, and learned to assist the ship's crew in times of battle. His duty was to haul gunpowder to the gun decks. Next, taken first to next taken to the West Indies, he was taken to Virginia after that, where he was sold yet again to another sea captain named Michael Henry Pascal, who gave him the name Gustavus Vassa, and with whom he traveled widely. This slave master, Pascal, favored Equiano and sent him to his sister in law in Great Britain so that he could attend school and further his ability to read and write. Equiano was subsequently enslaved by two other people, bought, sold, and resold. Finally, while working as a deckhand, a valet, and a barber, Equiano earned um, money by trading items that he picked up in his travels on as a side hustle. In only 3 years, he made enough money to buy his own freedom. Equiano then spent much of the next 20 years traveling the world, including trips to Turkey, and the Arctic. He became an abolitionist and writer whose autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African, written by himself in 1789. It became the first internationally popular slave narrative. And in it, Equiano expresses a strong abolitionist stance and provides firsthand testimony of the transatlantic slave trade, as well as a detailed description of life in what is now known as present day Nigeria. According to his own account, Equiano was captured in his Igbo village at age 11. He was sold into slavery and taken to the West Indies first. After buying his freedom, he received some education during his enslavement, which ended when he purchased his emancipation in 1766. After Equiano settled in England, he became an active abolitionist, agitating and lecturing against all of the cruelties of slavery. He thought a lot about the arbitrary nature of slavery and how slaves were sold and resold and never given the opportunity to establish any form of family nor citizenship. In the interesting narrative, Equiano showed great pride in the way of life which he lived as a child, and he was attacked and indicted. He attacked and he indicted the slave masters with his words of freedom. Those who he, those were the people who trafficked humans across Africa and turned them into slave. In the slave narrative, Equiano talked about how his father was a judge and the king of his village, and he made reference to the dietary laws and the fact that the boys were circumcised on the eighth day. He talked about how his people kept the Sabbath day and the feast days and how they treated their slaves as families and they served one true God, the God of Abraham. He talked about how his family and his village ate bitter herbs at Passover. He talked about how the women were quiet and modest and pleasant. He talked about, yet they were strong. They could lead or they could follow. He talked about the fact that his people kept the laws of cleanliness, including women being separated after childbirth and during their monthly cycle. He said that his people practice love, joy, goodness, kindness, and the other fruits of the spirit that we now know them as. And the slave masters who passed this book around and say that they lived by it, they actually did not. So the slave narrative, Olaudah Equiano, is a very good slave narrative that is not taught in schools anymore. One of the main reasons that this slave narrative is not taught in schools is because white scholars, academicians, began to contradict this book, saying that Olaudah had no such memories of this book and that he made it up. Still, as late as 2001, scholars write critical analyses of this book, calling it fraudulent. But we know why that is because it gives an accurate account of his life as an 11-year-old Israelite child whose father was a king and judge of the Igbo tribe. Scholars are still attempting to erase that, the race evidence that the descendants of the African American slaves were indeed Israelites. And I thank the Most High for allowing this slave narrative to be left for our children as they find their way back home in heart, at least, and prepare themselves for their place in the wilderness and ultimately the kingdom of God, New Jerusalem, a place prepared for God's people. Introducing Olaudah Equiano. You will find a free PDF copy of this book in the comments.